This is the FMCG Podcast, where we talk with the leaders of today and get their advice on how you can develop your leadership potential. Today we're joined by Julia Darvill, MD of Puratos UK. Stay tuned to hear her advice on what to look for in a leadership team, how to scale your company culture organically, and what you should look for in a career mentor. This podcast has been sponsored by FMCGjobs.com, the live job board for fast-moving careers. Let's get to it. Hi, good morning. My name is Rich and we're Consumer Hub, and this is the FMCG Podcast. And today we've got Julia Darvill on the show with us. Thank you, Julie, for coming on. Julia is the UK MD for Puratos, a worldwide bakery ingredients manufacturer. And we're going to be talking all things leadership today, giving you some top tips on how you can develop as a leader in the FMCG sector. So, Julia, thanks again for having, just giving us the time to come on the show. It's great to have you here. Just quickly, give the guys listening a quick snapshot on you, your career, what you're all about, and what you're doing now.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, my dear. What to say? It's an interesting thing on bios. I describe myself as a people warrior. So rather famously and unashamedly in the industry, lead, I guess, with people in mind. And as you said in the bio, I lead the UK Puratos team for the global conglomerate Puratos. And it's an absolute pleasure to work in food and drink in the UK, largely because, as I tell my international colleagues, it's the most dynamic country you could possibly play in, probably outside the US. I have a couple of sites in the UK and a very large team spanning across the regions, and they're just a privilege to work with.
Super. Well, I think that's a great bio. So, one of the reasons I was really keen to get Jules on the show is I've worked with Jules for years. She has done all kinds of interesting things in drinks. Then she's moved into food manufacturing, and she's had a couple of kind of gear shifts in her career. And all the people I know in senior leadership positions, I was really keen to get chatting with Jules because she is all about the people, and you can see that in the values on the wall behind. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But just as a bit of a kickstart question, Jules, where do you start when you're defining the strategy and direction of an FMCG manufacturing business? Because it's a big field of play, isn't it?
It is, and I think a lot of people would probably like me to say a kind of stock corporate answer, which is start with your customers. But for us, it starts before that. And as I said, a dynamic marketplace like this, there are something like 31 recognised religions in the UK. There's over 50 different types of diverse groups of what we eat, and inclusion is very important to food. So for us, it's understanding the psychology of who's eating and how they're eating. So it has to start with consumers. And having worked in B2B and B2C, I've seen a change in kind of attitude throughout COVID, actually, that's allowed people to refine or, amend their plans and their strategies. In Puratos, it's part of our mission globally to delight our customers, but you have to be really clear on what the customers want and meet those needs. That for me is a how. The why we're here, the purpose, is to make sure we add value, moments of delight in how we eat, and really understand what consumers want in the future.
Okay, that's really interesting. So kind of building up from the Simon Sinek, starting with why and the values. Yeah. And you're obviously very, very big on people within the structure of strategy. Where do people fit into the development of that successful strategy? At what point do you start thinking about the people dynamic in that strategy?
Great question. And I think it comes back to almost the same of the first answer, which is they're central. I've watched many organisations kind of build a foundation with people when they say that from a corporate perspective, but they don't necessarily then make the how come through in their strategy. When I talk about diversity, for example, our strategy in the UK to delight consumers is understanding consumers. Then you need to have a balanced approach in how you onboard a great team and build a great team, and being really clear on purpose and why we do what we do, getting that purpose alignment from a corporate perspective and what people want to be is very important to me. I'll give you a quick example. I have a lady in quality. The reason that she does what she does is she's completely fabulous. She tells me that her personal mission relates to her delight in making sure that allergens are going to protect her child, who, as a personal mission as a mother, is making sure that food safety is really critical. So she made a mission to then study and become an expert in those things. That's the kind of person you want in this type of organisation. So finding people that match your global purpose with their personal purpose is really important. And so it should start with finding the right people before you start building. Then you go, right, who have I got on my team? Cool, right, brilliant. Let's attack in this and this way.
Yeah, oh, that's really interesting. Certainly see that from a recruitment perspective. I always find companies that have a very well-defined criteria on their values and the type of people they want in the company, they're easier to recruit for because they tend not to just recruit a square peg for a square hole. It's much more about, okay, so here's the DNA of the company, here's the trajectory we're on, find us somebody whose story fits the story we're on. And if you can do that, there's a match, and it's less. Obviously, you need a level of technical competency to slot in and do a role in a leadership position in a company. But actually, there's more flex on what's really important if you start with the values, which I think is really interesting. And I think you often find companies like that, they really do live, eat, and breathe diversity and inclusion. Then, because you're not wedded to an out of the box solution, are you, for your people needs?
Absolutely. And COVID's going to be something that builds a sense of humanity that I hope will sustain the next generation. So as a mother of a 6 and a 9-year-old, 2 little girls, I want to make damn sure that I can influence in any way I can in any current organisation or industry wider than just where we are at Puratos, that there is fairness, equality and openness. My 9-year-old is autistic, so suffering from binary ways of thinking is something that at the moment she would fail in an interview because our current talent acquisition processes wouldn't allow her to be the best version of herself. So we need to think smarter about people at the centre of everything in our strategies before we start getting into death by process.
No, that's really interesting. Just picking up on that thread there around the values, can you just talk us through the values behind you? It'd be great to kind of hear what they're all about and why you've chosen them.
These are only, she says, moving my hair. Yeah. These are only 4 of our 6 company values. Cool. And one of the things so we've got ethics, so you can't see quality, ethics, vision, passion, team spirit, and my favourite at the end, which is courage. These are the 6 kind of corporate DNA, if you will. Now, many organisations have corporate DNA, and I've studied a lot on organisational design in the last couple of years because it's interesting to me. One of the things that I think that binds all of that is something we talk about at Puratos called magic, and it's like this. Can't really taste it, smell it, see it. It's just there, and that comes with trust, and that's at the centre of everything that we do. And I love that. Everyone can stick anything on their wall. One of the things that went live on LinkedIn a few months back was Huel, rather famously, "Don't be a dick." Love it. And that bold honesty, framing what is and isn't acceptable in behaviours. And that comes back to what you just said. You can have all the experience in the world, but if you can't behave in the right way, then you can't be welcome somewhere like this.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that there is definitely a problem. I think it is a problem. I think it's fair to say it's a problem in the industry. Lots of companies, they talk up the good game. They get a few values written down on the wall or on paper, and that's as far as it goes. One of our clients up in Leeds, Lisa's a people director, and she's very clear that she's a people director, not an HR director, which I think is really interesting. And she talks about instilling this kind of culture of values in the business, and one of her favourite phrases is that kindness is a virtue. And so actually, kind of, can we be kind throughout the business? And as a recruiter, I'm fairly low down in the food chain, and one thing I noticed in with them as a client is you're always given like a fantastic welcome when you go and visit that business as a supplier, and the way that you're treated as a supplier is top notch, because I kind of see the whole spectrum. And I think for me, that's when I come to recruit for them, that is fantastic, because I can say to the candidates in the process, look, they really live the values. I can tell you that as a recruiter because of the way they treat me. And actually, you end up with a whole kind of a bandwagon of ambassadors for your business that goes much further than beyond your direct employees then, don't you, if you live, eat and breathe it. So it makes commercial sense, doesn't it?
It does. And one of the things I say to the team, whether it's innovation that we do now via Zoom at the moment because of COVID, or you're interacting with a procurement director, and there's obviously stock negotiation, which is always a bit fractious. I want you to think about how you want this person to leave feeling, and then start with that in mind. Whatever that is, even if you want them to leave feeling that they've let us down as a supplier, then be clear on your agenda and be kind. Kindness costs nothing. No, it's true. It costs nothing, but it's hard to inculcate in the culture, isn't it? Unless you put it front of mind. I think one of the things that is, I'm very proud to be British, and I noticed this when I interface with different international parts of our organisation. It is a cultural thing. So there are some parts of the world that it's not synonymous, I guess, in their culture to be, it's almost seen as a weakness to be transparent or those types of things. We're very lucky and very fortunate in the kind of stoic British culture to be slightly apologetic and a little more open. One of the things I want to migrate the organisation is to make sure everyone feels safe learning. So it's okay to get it wrong. It's perfectly okay to get it wrong. Just go, hi, not sure I made that. As let's work on it together. Perfectly cool that you called it out right now. Let's do it together.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, we have this phrase internally at Consumer, which is if it's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. And by that, we don't mean let's make a hash everything rush, but you can't nail something the first time you do it. So if it's the first time you're doing it and you're trialing something, be honest with your customer. We're giving this a go. Are you interested in working with us on it? If not, no worries. But if you are, it's the first time we've done it, there might be a few hiccups. We'll flag them and we'll apologise and let's learn together. And that is so much more engaging, isn't it? That kind of partnership model.
Yes, and when you've already made a mistake, you don't want to be reminded of it. It's part of our ego and our psyche as evolved humans. You want somebody to say, cool. And then you want the humility and the trust that someone says, we had a social contract where I told you it was going to, we might mess it up, but how do you feel about that? Then they invited to be part of the solution with you, which is fabulous.
Yeah, no, I love that. That leads really well into the next question, which is, where do you start when you're building a leadership team?
Oh, it's my favourite thing to do. Honestly, Rich, it's one of my favourite things to do. And if I'm honest, I think I didn't start in my career the best version of that. So I think many will have fallen into this pitfall where you then gravitate towards birds of a feather flock together. You gravitate towards miniature versions of styles that you emulate in your own character, which starts with ego. And I can safely say I made one of those very early in my career. I think building great leadership now comes from diversity. And I don't mean in the diversity inclusion, I mean a spectrum of values, a spectrum of experience, far greater than your own. And then, so that's that kind of experience bank. And then the humility and trust that you then need to provoke in each of you to be wholly safe. I work with a number of coaching clients in my private life. And I'm always amazed at how many C-suites have this amazing bank of experience, but nobody has intimacy. And intimacy is always a very nervous word. And when you get to a certain level, you're even more guarded about, and there's a slight element of competition, even within, a lot of C-suites I've worked with. I find that disappointing because they're not helping each other. And one of the things we seek to do, certainly at Puratos, is build transparency and that kind of trust to be able to make mistakes or call each other out. And I love that because that's when the knowledge, you look at someone like 4-2 Commando and the Royal Marines, for example, based in Plymouth. We did some work with them quite recently and just before Christmas. Their level of understanding of each other is physically intimate because they're having to live in some extreme conditions. But that knowledge of what makes this person tick or pictures of this person's kids that, fuel that person, that understanding, that next layer of intimacy is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you guys do the colours insights with teams?
Yes. And you need that balance. You can't have everybody being red. And I've worked with organisations where even in the talent acquisition process, if you haven't hit a certain criteria on a block behaviour, that's not for me what a growth mindset is all about. And central to our strategy at Puratos is innovation. That's like the lifeblood of what we do. You're never going to have innovation and creativity if you don't have safety that people can go, have we thought about this or challenge this? And then people don't take it personally.
Yeah. There's one of my favourite business blogs by a bunch of management consultants called Farnham Street in Washington. And they had this really good blog recently they shared. I can't remember who it was by. But it was a professor of psychology and business from one of the big unis in America. And he was talking about having margin and how margin is the opposite of efficiency. And it's very easy to get locked into an efficiency mindset where let's squeeze every ounce of production possible out of this team or this process or this factory. But if you do that at the cost of your margin. And if you look at studies on where creativity comes from margin. It's that time chatting over an hour's lunch, letting people have an hour to relax. It's that time that comes from driving home and you commute, you've left on time at 5 to pick up your kids and your head's not fried because you're stressed because you're missing 2 calls you should have made. And talking about how companies that plan for margin actually over the long term achieve more efficiency than those that squeeze every ounce out of everybody. But that comes from values, doesn't it? It's what you place a value on in your people.
It does. Team spirit. And I think one of the things that we changed throughout COVID, actually, even just before the pandemic, which was good in hindsight, is I talk a lot about time is our currency. So you mentioned time twice there. You have to make time for something like that. And time equals money. And if you talk to many stakeholders, shareholders, they often misunderstand productivity, like you say, as pure focus and saturation, as opposed to time investing in. I mean, the insight that I've gathered from the intimacy and the time I've spent in coaching in the last 12 months is going to pay dividends for 5+ years yet.
Yeah.
Especially not in my my direct community, the wider business, we've been able to be more intimate, and also traveling between sites is quite a challenge. There's 4 hours between two of our sites. Being on Zoom and being able to have somebody one-to-one and giving them that time and that investment, it also means they'll be highly loyal. So there's lots to be said for that. I agree.
Yeah, I love that idea of time as currency as well, because I think you can get very locked into the pounds and pence, can't you? Which are important. You know, that's the kind of what pays the bills. But actually, they're what pays the bills and maybe pays the invoices, but they're not the sole sum of the currency that runs a business. Like I said, there's that that kind of human currency of connection and intimacy, which you can easily burn out because it's very hard to put a value on it. And actually, I think people that have high EQ, they have much more of a gut feel for whether there's strong human currency in a business, which again, like I say, comes back to the spirit thing, doesn't it? Which is really interesting.
Massively.
So just building on that then, very naturally, how do you create a culture of success? Once you've got those values, you've got the team, how do you sustain, roll out, scale that culture once you've got the core there?
I think it's about showing people how good it could be. So I'm naturally competitive, and you'd expect that with someone with a commercial background like this. But not everybody gets out of bed wanting to break through walls. And trying to get everyone to a stable base is understanding your purpose. So why are we here? If there's that value alignment that we talked about, where someone's personal mission and the company mission, that sweet spot, that's one thing. But then showing people sometimes how amazing it can be something that is, some people don't have a propensity for vision. Some people operate very successfully in quite a binary day-to-day. Showing them, I love telling great stories, so showing them how amazing something can be really provokes pride. And it's a great way to recruit that sense of belonging in somebody. I want a piece of that. I want to be part of that. And I don't think enough organisations, especially when we're making acquisitions, integration is really key, especially when you've got two different cultures you need to blend together. It's very important that everybody's clear on how good something could be, and they make that personal commitment to go, I want a piece of that. The minute you've got that, including your internal shareholders, of course, shareholders will invest very heavily in making sure that you can sustain your business growth. And whilst we want that humility and gratitude of that, you also have a job to sell them how good something's going to be. And I think reminding teams regularly of how you're doing, even when there are things that are not going so well, being transparent about, well, that's worked really well, this hasn't, so let's talk about that right now. And throughout the pandemic, we gathered monthly, where we previously would gather 4 times a year as a mass leadership team, and that's definitely paid dividends.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So kind of being proactive and making sure that the culture is always not a KPI, but it's an outcome that you're proactively managing.
Yeah, I like that, absolutely. And I think we need to change the way we measure success fundamentally. I mean, everybody has a P&L or shareholder dividends or return or whatever the metrics. There's always a commercial basis. Cash is king. But I think this time is currency is an interesting blend we're going to see. I hope so many businesses will start to envelop in their strategy. Someone like Google famously last year actually monitored line managers actually on how much time they invested in people. It wasn't, I've spent an hour with this person so I could tick a box. It was more, what did you get from that insight with that one-to-one that then yielded more innovation or more whatever it was in think tanks, which I thought was brilliant, because then people are being guided or shown or given the freedom and encouraged to invest time and feel safe to invest time, rather than the place where we keep saying, I just don't have time. Well, why don't you have time?
Yeah. We it sort of links to a few podcasts that we've done with various HR professionals, where they've sort of talked about the difference between like traditional HR being very policy led, and it's almost kind of it's a necessary, we wouldn't have it but we've got to, so let's just have, or HR as a commercial leadership function, which is actually about making sure that the commercial benefits from a strong people culture are put front and centre on the board. And that is a really interesting discussion, isn't it? Because it is a full-time job. Even in small business like ours with 4 people, Adam and I take responsibility for different things. That is one of Adam's kind of sort of things he's always got in his spotlight is how's the culture internally, where are we going, how are we tracking in terms of our values. And that comes round to the colours insights thing. Adam's very green, so he's naturally good at it. I'm a bit more red and yellow, so sometimes miss out on the fields there, I have to work at it. But I know it's important. So when Adam says we need to think about this and how what you've said there is perceived internally, I've got to listen because I've got to respect his role in the business.
Similarly, he needs your drive as well. He needs someone to say, that's nice, but how do we turn that into something that generates productivity? Yes.
Yeah. And I think when you get a really good, like say, intimate culture, where you really understand each other's benefits, each other's weaknesses, blind areas, areas that are in the spotlight in terms of somebody's kind of self-knowledge, then it's very powerful, isn't it? Because you actually start to have almost like an internal team self-awareness on where you need to be quiet, where you need to speak up, and you start to move more organically, don't you? Which is exciting.
Absolutely, it's self-policing, and that's always been my end in mind. You mentioned earlier, how do you build successful teams? My end in mind is always to make myself redundant. I start with the end in mind that at some point this team need to be able to operate with the right culture and dynamic and understanding of each other to be able to be fully functioning. That I don't need to be there. I don't favour at all a chain of command model. You need to create and foster trust.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, I mean, this kind of leads pretty much into the next question, which is how do you build vision and consensus when you've got opposing ideas in a team, or when you've got factions? It might be. I mean, you've obviously built this culture over time at Puratos, but for other leaders out there, maybe they're starting in a new role, they're going in to a change brief, and they've got to sort out some factions. What advice would you have for guys in those types of situations?
I think it starts with the grow, test, mirror. So I think an audit or an observation mode needs to be deployed by anybody. If you're at the start of that change, you need to be able to get everybody to come out and understand what others see. One of the things we did about 3.5 years ago was ask our teams what they expected of the leadership team, what a leadership team meant. Not necessarily that's right or wrong, but it was a perception as to be able to win hearts and minds in the future is understanding what do people expect of us versus what do we think leadership is. That was a very, very interesting audit. And then understanding what leadership styles each human in my team thought they were versus what each other thought of them. Having a kind of get it out all on the table, openness and observation mode, the diagnosis phase is really important. It might upset a few people, and it might be something that you need that social contract of safety to say, whatever we learn, we're in it together. It's okay that you're a 35-year seasoned professional and a professor in X, Y, and Z. You've got all this experience, but you have no idea how rude you are when you speak to people. That social contract needs to be in place. And I think the second part then is making sure that I guess you continue to monitor whatever it is that you track as progress. So we've had a few examples throughout COVID where people aren't handling crisis as well as others. That doesn't make them weak, and that doesn't make those strong and resilient. Resilience is a very personal and unique thing, and it comes from lots of things like your formative years, your education, your culture, etc. And I think having that safety to be able to say to each other, right, you don't agree, and these are the reasons you don't agree. You agree on this, then let's find some synergies between, I heard that you like this and you like this, let's pin them together, that's one thing. It's being able to kind of knit good bits together, and then having trust in the democracy that you go, right, there's 5 of you that think this, I'm really sorry, person 6, but do you trust us that you're going to go with it? Cool. That comes back down to trust again. I keep saying trust today, but that's central to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you see your role as the MD, it's kind of very much transcending autocracy and taking it into more of a chairman's role. Yes. It's kind of gathering the family together, gathering the team together around the shared values, rather than pushing a clear line everyone just has to get on board with, or they're off the bus.
Absolutely. Those days are gone. Even in really more antiquated, outside of food and drink, you're seeing the banking industry revolutionize its cultures. You're seeing startups in Silicon Valley start to bleed in, their cultures bleed into really antiquated parts of law and other professions where there's very stoic. And I love that. And I think we'll see more of that in the next 30 years. I certainly hope so for my children's sake. But there's still more of that to come. I think there are some cultures globally also that bleed into the UK where they're highly disciplined and they favour a hierarchy. I just hate that word. I understand that my job is to guide people, but often the answers lie in the individuals anyway. They just need the courage, or they need the promoter-supporter role in me to be able to find it and feel safe to go, yeah, let's do it. Let's take this risk. Let's go. And then I'll go, yeah, fine, great, let's go for it.
Yeah, it's something that I come across speaking to leaders, all the time, day in, day out. What I do is that the really good leaders I speak to, almost the summit of their role is about accountability to the values and the culture. It's less about the individual sort of strategic levers in the day-to-day, because chances are they've got a board beneath them that's very competent to deliver that. Actually, it's more about making sure that people don't go off the hymn sheet in terms of the objective, and that is much more of a cultural piece. And I think the companies that have that strong approach to leadership, like you've outlined there, they do get great loyalty. You find people that stick around in the business because they know why they're there. They're not there just for a paycheck. That pays the bills, but it doesn't keep you happy, does it?
Absolutely. I'm awake for my working day, whether it's a good or a bad one. You can go into the number of hours those would be in a good and bad week. Those waking hours predominantly are spent with my work family, my tribe. And so we need to feel the same level of intimacy and trust with each other, that we can go, as you would with your brother or sister, don't be a dick, to quote Huel, you're being a dick. And when you say this, it makes me feel, I think a lot of businesses, the higher you climb in an organization in a hierarchy, which I hate that language, but you know me well, any C-suite, the ego becomes something that is your default position. I see in many organizations, I work in the charity sector at the moment in my private life and something. I've seen a few C-suites where you've got some really fabulous professionals that I will say, well, have you told her this? No. Why haven't you told her this? And I find that fascinating. That wouldn't you not want to know this if someone felt this about you? Yeah, of course I would. Okay, well, you're adults. Let's share now, because you might be more productive together with honesty.
And just this is golden for those guys listening and for me. So we appreciate your insights here, Jules. But what's your view on what qualities it takes to develop as a leader in FMCG today?
Oh, that's a great question. There's two extremes, and they go on a spectrum for me. There's courage, determination, having that resilience to be able to say, get back up again. And that's something that doesn't come naturally. It can be a learned behaviour, and it can come naturally to some. It didn't to me. It can be a learned behaviour. Finding and understanding yourself enough to be able to click into go, go, go mode. That I will run through a wall for you, whatever it is for the customer, whether you're a service provider or you have an intense product. Some customers can really be quite challenging. Some customers can be challenging. Consumers can be a pain in the bottom. Having resilience is one thing. And then on the other spectrum is humility. Being able to go, why do you think that? And you shouldn't know all the answers in leadership. You should be inviting answers, and you should be giving people space and listening mode. And it's, again, not something that comes naturally to me. So I've had to learn hard to keep it stumm and listen. So humility and resilience, I think.
Right, that is really, really interesting. And just for, I speak to guys quite often in sales marketing. I want to be a marketing director one day. I want to be an MD. I want to be a sales director. Bit of a fascinating window into your professional life, Jules. Who are your key stakeholders in your role as a GM and MD, internal, external? Who do you spend most of your time with?
That's a great question. So I'll start internally for a second, and I would start with, I guess, shareholders and our C-suite are people who need constant information to be able to make sensible decisions, especially on a macro level. So the UK is a mega market for Puratos Group, and will continue to grow in that way. So we have an honour to keep sharing the relevant information and showing progress, because we'll keep getting investment. So there's that kind of internal pot. Internal second pot is my team. So making sure that I invest time in them and their team is really important, and making them feel like that team I'm highly present. I spend a lot of time with coaches who say, yeah, but I spent 3 hours with them. Okay, what did you get out of that 3 hours? I could spend 3 minutes with somebody in an elevator and get just as much out if I'm highly, highly saturated and constant and present. So they're the two kind of internals. And then external, it's a privilege to work in bakery because it's such a fantastically fun and mischievous and playful place to play. But the industry bodies, it's so much fun. And I'm still dieting for 5 years, 6 years on. But the industry bodies are a group of people that are also very diverse. You've got a wealth of experience, and we do need to start bringing in the next generation for sure, because people will be challenging things like diversity and inclusion. They'll be challenging how we innovate as an organisation. It's we're all in it together, competitors or not. We're all making sure we delight consumers and we keep people healthy and safe, and we're providing what the next generation should be consuming. So the industry bodies externally, alongside, of course, customers. I love spending time with customers. We've got some that I would say I'm as intimate with some of these customers that we are with the team. And that's a real privilege. And that's taken a lot of investment of time again.
That's really interesting. And again, what comes through there is the 360 nature of the relationships that you have to develop. It sounds like, if you want to develop as a leader at the top of I don't want to use the word hierarchy, but leading, developing the family, you've got to let go of your lane a little bit and learn to spread, which seems like taking that eagle eye approach is working. So we talked about the soft skills, the character attributes. Technically, what skills have you got to hone? Do you need to get your head around finance as an MD? What are some of the technical skills people can start to work on now if they want to develop as a leader?
Yes, so that's a great question, because when I came from a kind of a marketing and commercial background and sales, the business development part was kind of banked or ticked. I had never sat through acquisition due diligence documents, for example, prior to my tenure. So getting more technically savvy on some of the basics. Finance for Executives, great book, Finance for Executives. It's an INSEAD book that's absolutely wonderful. And I had the privilege of spending some time at INSEAD doing the Transition to General Management programme. I would recommend them 5 times over. They have a variety of amazing programmes in Fontainebleau in Paris. And the second part was kind of operational knowledge. So whilst I had been connected to parts of process through the commercial features in my previous role and even at Britvic, understanding, everyone understands supply chain, but understanding some of the technical functionality of manufacturing. I don't want to become an engineer, but making sure, first of all, I can show my engineering team that I understand what's causing them pain. That's really important from an empath perspective. But secondly, also thinking what can future-proof this and make sure you get more and more efficient to be able to be more competitive for customers. That was something that I'd never experienced before. And getting stuck in and being on the shop floor is another thing that the team love. They love that I do a weekly walk through the factories to be able to make sure I'm asking and checking in on things. I don't always know the answer. So what's that doohickey, what's it, and that thingamabob. But it's interesting. And we will go through an installation in the UK shortly in which we will become the only UK manufacturers of sourdough, for example, live sourdough, which is truly unique. But understanding that kit, I can't take it apart, but I want to know so I can enable the team to push and sell the right way.
That is very cool. Me and my missus were looking at our sourdough culture last night, so that is super exciting.
Love it.
What? So you mentioned quite a few times this idea of mentoring, and that is really interesting to me. Lots of the leaders that I speak to, they do have mentors, and I hear mixed bags, of stories about the experiences. Should people look for a mentor if they're choosing someone? What should they look for in a mentor? How do they sort of sense check that person's kind of going to have their best interests at heart, or they're just kingdom building?
Okay, good question. And I love that kingdom building phrase. I'm stealing that one. So to answer the first one, if you are a growth mindset personality, any knowledge is going to grow you. So yes to mentoring. But I think mentoring, coaching, training, counselling, whatever the word you want to use, is a very subjective and personal thing. And I think wherever I've seen it go wrong, it's where you haven't got the right chemistry, the right fit, and you haven't got the brief right. So those two things need to be invested when people are scouting out for the right person. Does this person demonstrate an area of knowledge or expertise that I could benefit from? And does this person understand me or show that they understand me? And that might be because you have a value alignment or whatever it is, or it might just be that sometimes you just gel. And I think very early on, you know whether you do or not. So having that little prequel for half an hour where you get to talk about each other outside of what your business needs are. Don't even talk about mentoring. Defining that social contract, defining what you want out of each other is key. So I have one coachee, for example, who says, I need you to be devil's advocate and be a giant pain in my ass. Every time we talk, I need your style because you'll get more out. I need heavy stick, not carrot. I need you to find what's wrong. I need you to nitpick. That promotes me and gets the best out of me. Fine, then we've got that and I can deploy that. I have another who says, I just need you to listen constantly and I just need to get it out in a safe space. You're my place in which I kind of shout into the pillow, but obviously she doesn't sit and shout to a pillow. So I think getting the social contract in place and doing your upfront research is not about how many years this person has been a coach. It's about whether their experience can offer you something and whether they gel with you.
Right, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'd never thought about that before. Yeah, there's a place for a driving instructor there, isn't there, in mentoring? That's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think all great coaches should be adaptable. Anybody who says, I'm IPF level 7 qualified, for me, that took a lot of investment in understanding my default style wasn't appropriate for a number of people. So then having to try on different jackets and get comfortable wearing them, some don't come naturally to me. So it's just that humility is important as well.
Right, no, thank you. That is a great insight. Just finally then, Jules, and thank you again for all the insights. Are there any resources that you would recommend people dig into, books on leadership, podcasts, courses, etc., that you think, right, that was so important for me, guys, go and check it out?
Okay, so a book that changed the way I operate is Brené Brown's Daring Greatly. It's about vulnerability. There's a lot of podcasts out there about it. So if you go onto Spotify or Apple Music and you search for Brené Brown, there's a lot of people who've had her on things. I think she's wonderful, not because she's just a working female and we have that kind of value alignment, but because the way she says things is soft enough for me and my giant ego to take it on board. She's got quite a few good books out. They're well written, they're easy reads. I think the second thing I would say is if anyone's thinking about learning more the mechanics and the processes of mind or organizational design that they think will add value to their leadership style, do genuinely Google INSEAD. I'm not being paid by them incidentally, but I cannot say enough about the structure. Everyone kind of goes, why do you keep talking about them? I had the privilege of working with someone. Tick. With someone called Professor Galanich, so Charlie Galanich, absolutely wonderful man. There's loads of TED Talks that he's done if you just Google him, largely because the style in which he approached things is very unbiased. A lot of his teachings are short, sharp things, so they're 7-minute YouTube clips on certain topics. And I find them, it's easy to listen to if I'm running or if I'm out with the girls. It's something that quite often we even listen to things in the car together. And these are a 6 and a 9-year-old talking about positivity cultures.
That's good.
Which is great. So
brilliant. Right, look, thank you so much. Today it's been an absolute pleasure, Jules. Really, really enjoyed just chatting leadership. It's great. Guys, if you want to find Julie, you can find her on LinkedIn. She's really active there and shares loads of interesting things about Puratos, which are a fascinating kind of company. If you're like me and you're a bit of an FMCG nerd, loads of interesting stuff about the bakery sector there. But loads of great tips on leadership as well from Jules on LinkedIn. So find Julie Darvill on LinkedIn, Puratos. Anywhere else we can find you if we want to have a snoop, see what you're up to?
You could definitely find me on Insta, but most of that's paddleboarding or bakery items.
Okay. But LinkedIn for leadership, smashing. Well, look, guys, thanks for joining us today. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you again to Jules and the guys at Puratos. And if you've not done this already, subscribe on YouTube. Find us there. Come and check out our company page. Go and check out Puratos company page. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Thanks to FMCGjobs.com for supporting this video. FMCGjobs.com is a global job advertising solution for the fast-moving consumer goods industry. Register for free as a candidate and create your specific job target to get live updates and alerts. Head over now to FMCGjobs.com for your next opportunity. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Check out the playlist here for more content like this. Click the donuts to subscribe so you never miss an update, and give us a like and a comment so we know what content you'd like to see from us. See you next time.